Welcome back to News Talk. Joining us now, Maryland Congressman Steny Hoyer, a Democrat from the 5th District of his state. He's the minority whip in the U.S. House. He's with us from Cannon. Thank you very much for your time, Congressman. It's good to see you as always.
Good to be with you, Bruce.
Congressman Hoyer joining us thanks to our ongoing Connect to Congress series. Let me begin, Congressman, if I can, by asking you about Zika funding. The House and Senate left town for nearly 2 months without getting final approval for the $2 billion that public health officials say is needed now to fight Zika in the way all of us want it to be fought. No luck before the recess. Can you that, and what are the prospects now?
Well, my reflection is, I think the Republicans in the House of Representatives have been extraordinarily irresponsible, and are creating great danger to the American people from a health perspective regarding Zika. The Senate passed overwhelmingly, 68-30, more than 2/3 voting for it, Republicans and Democrats, to fund Zika. It was less than the president asked, but it was $1.1 billion. It was emergency funding, as it ought to be. We're confronting an emergency. And it was unfettered with Republican poison pills. The Senate did the right thing. We should have taken that bill and passed it before we left. Rather than do that, the Republicans put in what they clearly knew not only were unacceptable to the president and to Democrats in the House and the Senate, but also dangerous for people's health, because they eliminated health services essentially to women in Puerto Rico, prevented contraception in a disease that can be transmitted sexually, a totally irresponsible action that they took, and then they left town. I am shocked and deeply disappointed that we came back after 7-8 weeks where the Republicans had an opportunity to plan what they were going to do to deal with this emergency, and we have filler this week. Bills that aren't going to pass the Senate, bills that the president's not going to sign, and that aren't high priority items for the country. And Zika is not being addressed. We ought to pass the Senate bill. They can take the Senate bill from the desk, although we've been to conference, but they could take that, make it a House bill, pass it, and the Senate would, in my opinion, pass it probably by unanimous consent or very quickly and send it to the president for his signature. That's what we ought to be doing.
A couple years ago, Ebola came along as a threat, and it seemed, and I'm sure that it was right before the election, had no bearing on this. It seemed like there was a real push to do something robust in terms of funding and tackling Ebola. Is there a contrast?
Well, it's ironic. It's ironic that a Republican leadership who thought they were going to put Barack Obama and his administration on the defensive in dealing with Ebola, when they dealt with it very effectively, said he wasn't doing enough. It is ironic that the same Republican party is now obstructing and preventing and delaying Zika legislation from being passed. Again, I want to stress, some people said, oh, well, it's the Senate Democrats. That's baloney. It's not accurate. The Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans passed a bill. It is not what the president asked for, but it is a very good start and would give the resources to the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, to pursue programs which will make Americans safer and try to develop a vaccine against Zika and go after the mosquitoes themselves. So it is ironic that in both instances they're playing politics with this, with the health of the American people. It's unfortunate.
Are we heading to a federal? Are we heading to a Hill stalemate on federal spending?
Well, I certainly hope not. The Senate again has passed or is about to pass. McConnell says it's going to pass a continuing resolution for approximately 3 months to December 9th. And then hopefully we will, by that time, have resolved the appropriation issues for 2017 and pass a bill, as we did last year, an omnibus bill, which funds government between then and September 30th of next year. That's what we ought to do. That's the responsible thing to do. But again, Republican hardliners are demanding that we just do partial funding for partial year, and frankly half fund in some respects our defense effort overseas. The fact of the matter is, I think the Senate is hopefully going to do the responsible thing. I would hope that we would follow suit in the House of Representatives and pass a continuing resolution which will fund government between now and December 8th. We haven't passed a single appropriation bill through the Congress, again, because the Republicans have not sought to reach compromise with Democrats or the President, which is necessary when you have both parties in control of one part of the process. And so there are other issues which they have ignored. Opioids. We haven't funded the effort on opioids, which is a crisis throughout the country. We need to deal with the Flint crisis on the water, lead in the water in Flint, Michigan. People are still at risk and still drinking out of bottled water. We should be addressing that problem. And in addition, we have an epidemic of gun violence in America. And we have urged the Republicans in the House of Representatives to put on a Republican bill sponsored by Peter King of New York, a Republican, who's the former chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, who has two bills that we think are very reasonable, supported by 90% of the American public, which say if you're too dangerous to fly on an airplane, you're too dangerous to buy a gun. And secondly, which says if we adopt the premise we ought to have background checks, then we ought to have background checks in every transaction, not just some of the transactions. Because clearly, if you have on just some of the transactions, somebody who wants to do harm and do bad things goes the route that there's no check. So we need universal background checks. Peter King, a Republican, former chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, has two bills that do that. We're asking the Republicans to bring them to the floor. Those are actually four items of critical importance to the American people, and they're not being dealt with. And that's, I think, a demonstration of the continual dysfunctional leadership in the House of Representatives by Republicans.